In this tutorial, we're going to look at how to prepare a 3D scene in order to render it for the Color, Material and Lighting iteration tool, Colorway. Then once in Colorway, we'll look at the iterative tools that are available to you. We'll then look at how to produce a Colorway file for Colorway Presenter, and finally look at how to push that Colorway data back into 3D for further development. We'll start by looking at how to prepare a 3D scene for Colorway, as Colorway is reliant on that data as a starting point. In this video, I'm going to be using Modo 801, but in time, more 3D applications will be supported. Now, we've provided a number of files for you to work with during this tutorial, and you'll find them in the content folder that comes with this video. So in Modo, if we navigate to that folder on your system, and we need to open up the Colorway p1start.lxo. In order to create a Colorway file, you'll first need the Colorway kit installed in Modo, and when it is, you'll find this button at the top of the UI called Colorway, and when you click on it, you'll be presented with a menu containing a number of tools. So let's take a look at this scene. So we've got a model of a coffee maker, we've set up a background, it's lit with a combination of GI, a number of direct light sources, and also a luminous polygon. The model has been material named here in the shader tree, and various parts of the model have been UV'd. The only thing we haven't done is actually defined any colours for the model, because that's what we want to do in Colorway. Importantly though, these materials haven't been left in their default state. We've already made decisions about whether they're going to be reflective or not, and also whether they're going to need some logos applied to them. Now, all of the grey materials are materials that we want to be able to manipulate inside of Colorway, and grey is a nice starting point. Now, the Colorway kit works by allowing you to tag aspects of the scene that will then become editable inside of Colorway. But before we do that, there are a few things to remember. First of all, if there are any UV maps that you want to use to apply textures inside of Colorway, then you need to set those up in a certain way inside the shader tree. So you need to be able to provide a link between the UV map that's on the object and a certain material in the shader tree. Now, I know that I want to be able to apply textures to the side of this coffee maker. So if I find that material, which is body, what I need to do is go to Add Layer in a shader tree and load a constant layer. We can set that to mid-grey. And then if we select the texture locator, we need to set the projection type to UV map, and then select the UV map that we want to use. In this case, it's texture. So repeat that process for any other materials where you might want to utilize a UV map. And once you've done it, we can now tag the materials. So if we go to the Colorway kit, you can see we have an option for tagging all materials. Now, the more materials that we tag, the longer the render time. So unless your shader tree is only small, we don't advise you to use the tag all materials option. It's better to be more selective about the materials that you want to be able to control in Colorway. So instead, what I'm going to do is just select the materials that I want to control, and I've named them CW after their titles. So I'm just going to hold down Control and select those materials. And now when I come up to the Colorway kit, we now have an option for tagging selected materials. So I'm going to click that, and in the shader tree, those materials will become highlighted. So with all the materials tagged, we can now tag the lights. Now I could just come to the Colorway kit and say tag all lights, but there are some other interesting options available to you. For example, say I wanted to group some lights and then control them as a group inside of Colorway. I first need to create the group, so I'm going to select these two area right lights, go to the groups viewport, click new group, and I'll call this area light right. Click OK, so now I've got a group. Then I come to the Colorway kit, and with that group selected, I can hit tag light group, and that group will become highlighted. Then I can select all of the other direct light sources. So I'm going to hold down Control and select those. Come to the Colorway kit, and now I can click tag selected lights, and they'll become highlighted. Now, as I mentioned before, this scene also has a piece of luminous geometry in it, and it's this mesh item called Lumi, and you can just see it there in the top left hand corner of the 3D viewport. Now in Modo, to make a piece of geometry luminous, you have to give it a luminous amount via a material. So I'm going to create a material by hitting M, and we'll call this Lumi. Hit OK. We get a new material in the shader tree. So if I select the material, come to Material Trans and set a luminous intensity value, say 5. What I can now do is select that material, go to the Colorway kit and click Tag Selected Material. So when I actually render this now, it will realize that this material has a luminous value to it and class it as a light. So with the scene tagged, we can now render it. So if we come to the Colorway kit, click Render Scene for Colorway, give it a name, Coffee Machine, click OK, decide where you want to save it, click Open, and then you'll get a dialog that describes what's actually going to get rendered. So we've got 10 materials, including one luminous material, one light group will be tagged for export. Yes, please. And it'll start rendering. So when that scene has finished rendering, you can then open up Colorway. And when you first open it up, you're presented with this start screen, which helps you to manage the projects that you're working on. So to open up the rendered scene, just click on Open a Project, and then navigate to the place on your system where you actually save the file. Or alternatively, if you didn't want to wait for that render to finish, you could just go to the content directory that comes with this video and open up Colorway p2 start.dci. Now I'm just going to cancel that for now because I want to go back to this start screen, because what's really nice about it is that when you open projects, it creates a thumbnail of that project, which allows you to quickly open it just by double clicking on that thumbnail. So I've already opened up this Colorway P2 start, so I'm just going to double click on the thumbnail and the scene will open up. So as you can see, the interface is very clean. We've got the image visible in the middle and we have these 5 icons at the bottom of the UI. Now you can zoom the image in the viewport by using your mouse scroll wheel, and the image will scale from the cursor location. Alternatively, you can use the minus and equal keys on the keyboard. F will fit the image to the viewport. H will fill the image in the viewport. 1 will show the image at full size, and 2 will show the image at half size. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, I just wanted to fill the viewport, so I'm going to hit H. So if I move my mouse across the image, you can see that parts of the object highlight. Now, these are all the parts or materials that we tagged inside of Modo, so they will be editable inside of Colorway. And we can view those individual parts just by clicking on the cube icon, and that will bring up a list on the left-hand side of the UI of all of those selectable parts, and the area that's selectable is highlighted in red. Now as you're working, if you find that highlighting annoying, with things flashing on and off all the time, then you can always toggle that display on and off using the O key on the keyboard. So I just hit O. You see as I move the mouse over there now, you see we're not getting any pre-highlighting. But we haven't lost any functionality at all. We can still select the individual parts, we just can't see them as clearly. So I'm going to turn that overlay back on, so I'm going to hit O. So what about the lights that we tagged in the Modo file? Well, if we come down to the light bulb icon at the bottom of the UI and click that, we'll get a list on the right-hand side of the UI of all the lights that we tagged. So we've got all of our direct light sources there. We've got the luminous polygon that we defined, and we've also got area lights right, which is the group that we defined. Now, if we select one of those lights, for example, the area lights right, we can come down and actually change the intensity of that light. So if I drag the slider, you can see how it's getting brighter, or I can turn it off completely. And we can also change the color of the light with the color wheel. So the area in the middle of the color wheel will change the hue and saturation, and the area around the color wheel will change the lightness. You can also show the effect of any particular light very quickly using these icons in the bottom right hand corner of each thumbnail. So if I select this point back 2 and click M, it will turn off that light, and if I click S, it will just show me the effect of that individual light on the scene. So I'm just going to turn that off by clicking on the S icon. Now if you want to get back to the original starting point for the scene, if you click the icon with 4 circles, that brings up the looks list. We'll get onto looks in a minute, but you can see there's one thumbnail that says original. So if you just double click on that, it'll reset all of those settings. So what you can do now is just play around with these lights until you get lighting that you're happy with. For example, I think I might turn off all the luminous polygon, and I might want to drop the intensity of that light a little bit, but just spend some time playing around with those lights. So what happens when we actually select one of these parts that we defined? I'm just going to click on this part on the side of the coffee maker, and when we do, we get this HUD or HeadUp Display, which contains a color wheel and also a sphere and a cross. So the sphere is the material that's currently assigned to that part, which is the grey, and if I use the colour wheel, you can see the colour of the sphere changes and also the colour of the part in the image changes. Now if I want to create another material, I can just click on the cross. That creates a new sphere, and then I can create another colour, and so on. So I can gradually create a palette of colours that I can play around with, and I can choose different ones just by clicking on different spheres. So one thing to note about the HeadUp Display is that when you create a new material, it always takes the colour of the currently selected material. So for example, if I select the blue, that colour gets applied to the part and the blue sphere becomes slightly bigger to indicate that that's the selected material. And then if I click the cross, it creates a new material, but it takes the same colour as the one that was selected. So that's really useful for creating a palette of colours with a very similar hue. Now if you want to delete a material from the HUD, all you have to do is select it and drag it off the HUD and then release the left mouse button, and that'll be removed. So I'm just going to actually delete all of these apart from one, and then I'm going to set that back to being a mid-grey. And then I just want one other material on here now, so I'm going to hit the cross and I'm going to make that white. Now we can manage the materials that we're creating in more detail by clicking on the paint bucket icon at the bottom of the UI, and on the right hand side of the UI we'll get a list of all of the materials in the scene. So whereas the HUD is great for managing your materials locally to a specific part, the list on the right hand side of the UI is great for managing your materials more globally. So for example, say this white material that I created on the side of the coffee maker, say I wanted that to be an option for all of the other parts. Well, what I could do is I just click on the name and I'll call it white. Hit return. What I can then do is click on another part, and then if I click and drag that material onto that part, it now becomes an option for that part in the HUD. So let's click on this one, make it an option, click on that one, make it an option, and finally that one. Now the whole thing is white, but what's great is instead of going into the HUD for each of those parts and changing the colour, all I need to do now is select that material and use the colour wheel at the bottom to change the colour, and now I'm affecting the colour of every single part that has that material applied. Now inside of this material list we can also create new materials by clicking on the cross. We can delete materials by clicking on the minus icon, and we can duplicate materials by clicking on this folder icon in the bottom right hand corner. We can also view the materials as a list rather than thumbnails, and we can also filter the whole list. So I just type in Lumi, we just get that Lumi material. So Colorway doesn't only allow you to apply colors, you can also apply textures. So this material isn't white anymore, it's actually pink. So I'm just going to call it pink. And I'll select the side of the coffee maker, create a new material, and I'll make that white. Now, one thing to bear in mind, if you want to deselect a part and remove the HUD, you just need to click anywhere in the image which isn't a selectable part. So I'm just going to click on the background here, and that will remove the HUD. So for any selected material, you have three options below it in the color palette. You have the color, which you can adjust with the color wheel, which we've already done. And the next one down is the add texture option. So if I click on that, we get a dialog which allows us to load an image map in. So I'm going to click on the cross, and if you go to your image directory, inside the content folder, you'll find a carbon fiber texture. I'm going to open that up. Now, because I defined a UV map for that part in the Modo file before I rendered it, it's going to automatically apply that texture via that UV map. So with that applied, I can then tile it and rotate it if I need to. Now, if there's no UV present, then it's going to apply the texture cubically. So if I select this part, create a new material, let's make that white, and then add the same texture. Let me just tidy it up a little bit. You can see there, if I just zoom in, how it's being applied cubically. So I'm just going to delete that carbon fiber material off there and select the side. Now, one thing to bear in mind is when you apply a texture, it's always multiplied over any material. So if I go back to the color and change the color, you can see how that color is coming through that texture. Now, a decal is different because it just lays the image on top of any material and it'll use any alpha in the image. So if I select that one, create new material, and I'll make that white. And then this time I'm going to add a decal. Hit the cross, and in your image directory you'll find some flower PNGs. I'm just going to load in this red flower. Open that up, and you can see it gets applied straight on top. But if I now change the color, you can see that the color of the flower doesn't change. So armed with that knowledge, go ahead and create a look for this coffee maker. And remember, you can also change the color of the background to match any design that you come up with. So all I've done here is created a single red material and applied it to all the other parts. And that allows me to kind of match the red color with the red of the flower. And then just added some color to the environment just to make the whole thing pop a little bit more. But now I've got that look, I need to save it. And this is where the looks list comes in, or the looks panel. So to save it, all I need to do is click on the cross in the looks list, and that'll create a new thumbnail of that look. So now what we can do is carry on and create some more looks. Now, if you want to go back to the starting point, you can just double click on the original, and that'll load that in, and you can start changing the colors again. Or alternatively, if you want to create a look that's similar to the one you've already created, you can just select that look, click on the folder icon, that will duplicate it, load that in, make a change. So I'm going to create a new material for that, and I'm going to make that white. And then to push that change back into that look, you just hit the equals icon. Now, one thing to bear in mind when you're creating looks is that you have to create a new material, because if you don't, it'll change that material in all of your looks. So for example, if I click on this part and we've got this red selected, if I change the color of that red to a pink, you can see it changes the color in both of those looks. So if I just hit Control Z, that'll back out of that. So if I want to change the color of that part, I have to create a new material first. And then if I change the color, the looks don't update. And then I can create my new look. So go ahead and create as many looks as you want for this coffee machine. And alternatively, just open up the Colorway P2 finish scene that's in the content directory. And this scene has a number of different looks already created for you. and you can cycle through them easily by using the left and right arrow keys on the keyboard. So Colorway also gives you the ability to apply various effects to an image. So if you click on the camera icon, you'll get this blank panel on the right hand side, and if you click on the cross, you'll get a list of various filters. So we've got vignette, lens distortion, denoise, defocus, color correction, that kind of thing. So for this image we might want a vignette. Change the radius, make it a bit softer, and we also might want a bloom. Get a bit of a glow around that object. Now, interestingly, you can use the arrow keys on the bottom right, in the bottom right hand corner, to change the order in which those filters are applied. So one thing to remember about these filters is that they're applied globally across all the looks that you've created. So if I double click on another look to load it in, you can see I've still got the vignette and the bloom applied. So now that we've got all of our looks, we need some way of outputting them. And we do that by rendering them to individual image files. Now you can render an individual look by using Command R on a Mac or Control R on Windows. Or alternatively, you can batch render all of the looks in one go by using Command Shift R or Control Shift R on Windows. So you can set your resolution, your image type. You need to choose a directory. It'll automatically append the look name and format to the file name, and all you've got to do is hit render. In this section, we're going to look at how to set up a file for Colorway Presenter. Now, one of the great things about Colorway is that you have an unlimited color wheel for each part of the object. But when you're trying to make production decisions, that can be dangerous. In reality, material and colour choices can be limited by what's physically possible to produce, what fits within budget, and what fits within a defined set of variants for a season, range or brand. So what Colorway allows you to do is limit the options available, so only those options will be viewable when the file is opened in Colorway Presenter. So in Colorway, I've opened up the Colorway P3 start scene from the content directory, but it's actually just the raw render straight out of Modo. So to start with, I might want to limit the number of parts that I want somebody to be able to interact with inside of Colorway Presenter. Because, for example, these two sections at the bottom of the coffee maker, for production reasons, it might only be possible to manufacture those with one material and one colour. So what I can do is define that colour. So if I select that material, I'll just make it black. Do the same with that one. And then to lock it, I can open up the parts list, find those parts, select it, and then in the bottom right hand corner there's a little padlock. If I click that, it will lock that part. So I'll do the same with that one. And now those two parts will not be available for selection inside of Colorway Presenter. Now it's a similar process for lighting. So I open up the light list. Now in this scene I only really want somebody to be able to interact with the background, so they can change the colour and intensity of the background to match any colour combinations that they put onto the object. But I don't really want them to be messing around with the lighting on the object itself. So to do that, I've got these two lights at the top here, point back and point back 2, which are the lighting for the background. So I want to keep those two, but then I can select the next one down. And what's nice in the light list, if I come right to the bottom of the list, hold down Shift and select the bottom one, it'll select all the ones in between as well. And then we can click on the padlock and all of those selected lights will be locked. Now, limiting material and colour choices is about limiting how many materials you place on a HUD. So I want to start with this material on the side of the coffee maker, and I want to apply a decal to that, and the colour of that decal is going to dictate some of the other colour choices. So let's open up the material palette. Now, I have all of the default materials in here that came in with the Modo file, so I'm going to create a new material by clicking on the cross, and I want to apply the texture to it. So add texture, and I'm going to select from the image folder flowersred.png, open that up, and then I'm just going to click and drag that material onto that part, and it'll get applied to the HUD and also applied to the image. Now you might want to give somebody a choice of 3 reds that will go with that red flower. So let's create those three materials. So I'm going to create three materials and select the red. So we'll have that red, more of an orange, and more of a pure red. And then what we need to do is go to the other parts of the object and drag those into their HUD. Now what's nice about applying one material to a number of different parts is it's now very easy to edit that material. So you can see I've applied the same colour to each of those parts. I can now select this part, and if we need to change that, I can just adjust the colour wheel, and you can see that colour changes on all the parts which are using that material. So I've defined all of the material choices that I want somebody to have. So if I click on this side, you see we've got a number of different colours in combination with graphics or flowers. And then each of the other parts has a range of colours that can be chosen. Now you can preview what this scene is going to look like in Colorway Presenter by hitting the E key. So when I do that, you can see we can only see the selectable parts in the parts list. We only have 3 icons now at the bottom of the UI, and we can't see the material editor. And if I bring up the light list, we only have the 2 lights that we didn't lock. But most important of all, if we select a part, we don't see the color wheel, only the materials that we've defined. So if you hit the E key, everything will come back. And now all we have to do is send this file to the person responsible for making the decisions. So in Colorway Presenter, I've created a number of looks based on the options that were available to me. So now we need to get those looks back to the person who sent me the file originally. And we can do that by using the Export to Colorway command, which on a Mac is Command-Shift-E, or on Windows it's Control-Shift-E. And we need to navigate to area on your system, give it a name, and it's going to save it as an LKP file. Click Save. And then we can email that back to the person who needs it. So back in Colorway, I'm still looking at the original file that I sent, but I've just received an email with the LKP file attached. So if I bring up my looks list, you can see at the moment I've only got the original look that was in the scene. So what I need to do now is load that LKP file into this scene. So I do that by using Command-Shift-I on a Mac or Control-Shift-I on Windows. So then I can select the LKP file, hit open, and the looks will get loaded in, and I can cycle through them with my left and right arrow keys. So now that we have those looks, we can easily render them for review. So I just hit Shift-Command-R on a Mac or Shift-Control-R on Windows, set the resolution, the file format, and the directory we want to save them, and just hit render. As well as having the ability to render the looks straight out of Colorway, you may also need to push those looks back into 3D to either continue working on the scene or to simply render specific looks at a bigger resolution or in a different context. So to get these looks back into Modo, we need to run the Export to 3D command, which is Command-E on a Mac or Control-E on Windows. We need to give it a name, and it's going to save it as an LKS file. Hit Save. And now we can jump back over to Modo. So in Modo, I have the scene loaded that we used to render the Colorway file. So to load the looks in, we go to the Colorway kit, and we need to click Import Looks from Colorway. And in the dialog, select the LKS file and hit Open. Now this dialog has come up because since I actually rendered the Colorway file, I changed the name of the Modo file. So it's saying there might be a mismatch and things might not import correctly. So I'm quite confident that it's the same file. So I can hit Yes. And then we get another dialog And because the Colorway file used textures that were applied to the object that weren't part of this scene initially, it needs to know where to put those files, because the texture files are actually stored internally inside the Colorway file. So I'll just hit yes, and then I'll navigate to the folder and click open, and I need to do that for each texture. So when that's finished, you'll get a dialog that tells you if any materials were skipped, and in this case none were skipped, which is good. So I can hit OK. So with that loaded, you can see that each tagged material in the shader tree has a new group within it called Colorway Looks, and that group is locked so you can't edit it. And each looks file that you import comes in as a pass group, and each of the looks comes in as a separate pass. So at the moment we're looking at the orange-blue look in the pass list here, but I can easily change that to yellow carbon V2, and the textures will change and preview will update. Now the looks in the shader tree aren't permanently locked. You can simply right-click on them and choose Unlock Preset, and now you're able to expand that group, and you can see inside that group there's a list or a mask for each individual look. So you could go in and start editing those if need be. Also, because of Modo's override system, you can also start texturing straight on top of the look inside the material group. So if I select the body material, I can add a very simple texture here. Let's just add a noise texture on top of that. And you can see it overrides the side of the coffee maker, and then I can simply either drop the opacity or change the blending mode. And what's brilliant about that is the looks still exist underneath that texturing that I've been doing. So I can change the pass but that noise texture will still be there. Colorway is an application that aids the creative process and focuses the decision-making process. It recognises that a team of people involved in making design decisions have different goals and expertise, and it brings clarity and efficiency to a process that can easily be repetitive and wasteful. Rather than trying to make iterative changes in 3D, which can be a technical process and also an intimidating one for someone without the necessary 3D skills, Colorway allows you to prepare and render everything up front, allowing changes to be made almost instantaneously later on. It's both a creative tool and a presentation tool, intelligently designed and easily discoverable. The perfect tool for helping you to make the right creative decisions.